Hey folks, how's it going? This time we're going to take a quick trip back to Pelican Town and build a barn for our animals. To start this project, I took some cardboard that I had left over from some previous deliveries and built a frame that would become the structure of the barn. With the pieces all cut out, I glued them together with my hot glue gun. I also added some extra stability inside. For the siding, I decided to use some popsicle sticks since making wood look like wood is very easy. And once they're all cut, I could just hot glue them to the side and create the barn. I decided to paint some of the windows and gaps black ahead of time since I figured it'd be easier to paint it now rather than reach in afterwards. The barn has a little sliding door that the animals can use to walk in and out of, so I made that out of some strips of balsa wood that I cut apart and glued back together. For the door, I took a piece of balsa wood and then cut out the two gaps that would be the indents in the door. And then filled those indents in with some wood filler to try to mimic the texture a bit. And then I began to do some detailing on the barn. There were a lot of thin bars of wood that surrounded windows or any sort of gaps. So I cut out some thin strips of balsa wood and glued them where they should go. Similar to before, I decided to paint some of the details ahead of time that I knew would be hard to reach once the rest of the barn was assembled. And then in a shocking twist of events, I decided to make the roof also out of balsa wood. So I just cut those out and hot glued them down. Above the door is a little overhang that protects people going in and out of the barn from any sort of rain or weather. So I glued together a few pieces of balsa wood and then glued that right above the door. Then it was finally time to start painting. This is always one of my favorite parts, where it starts to look much more like the final product. Because I got kind of lazy towards the end, I decided to just paint on the hinges of the door rather than make them out of something. But then I became unlazy and made the door handle out of a pin that I coated in some bronze paint. At this point, I wanted a bit more depth to the roof, so I decided to cover the whole thing in some chipboard. And then I went back in time before I covered the roof in chipboard and started working on the sliding doors. I took some very thin cardboard I had, painted it red so that I could place some chipboard in the right pattern on top that I would paint white. And with my doors done and my roof magically back on, I just glued the doors down to the side. To try and make the roof look more uniform and to be able to give it the right pattern that the game has, I filled in some of the cracks with some leftover wood filler I had. And then to carve in the tiles, I sketched on the lines and the pattern that was needed and took my wood carving knife and started carving them in. I gave everything a quick final pass with a small screwdriver just to widen the indents a bit more. Since the roof isn't actually made out of chipboard, I covered everything in modeling paste. And then gave it the old proverbial stippling to try to give it much more of a tile texture. And then since all that modeling paste filled in the gaps I had worked real hard for before, I went back and scraped them in again. And then it was finally time to start painting the roof. The roof came out a little lighter than I liked, so I put in some effort to try to darken it up with some black wash, which I then stippled off because it didn't really work. And then I put on some actual black paint. To give everything a much more lived in and weathered feel, I smothered everything with some black wash. And the final piece of the whole thing was to create the small little leather bag that hangs right by the door. I went with the same approach as before in that I used leather to make the leather bag, since it's very easy to make leather look like leather. I cut out a few strips and cut out a vague bag-shaped piece and just glued everything together. It doesn't actually work like a bag, but it looks like one, I guess. And then finally I just attached that bag with the other end of the doorknob pin. And called it good.